two friends got to work. Titanic survivors tried to get what little rest they could. Some wrapped up in clothes fashioned from steamer rugs, numbing the pain with drams of brandy. The weather, meanwhile, had taken a nasty turn. The sea kicked up to a terrible chop and heavy rain pounded the ship, alarming the already traumatized survivors. Titanic passenger Emanita Shelley remembered feeling as though the sea devils were evidently mad at the idea of any of us escaping their clutches. Lawrence Beasley wrote that the Carpathia returned to New York in almost every kind of climactic condition, listing ice fields, freezing rain, moments of brilliant sun, thunder and lightning, cold wind, fog, and thick sea spray. All on board were desperate to get home, but even once they'd landed, comfort would still be a long way off. The world that every person on board had left behind when they set off on their journey was not the world they were about to return to. After 3 days at sea, Carpathia slowly steamed into the channel entrance at Lower Bay that would take her into New York. From the sky, countless raindrops fell as if nature itself was shedding a tear for Titanic survivors. They crowded the railings, stunned into silence by the ghostly sight of the Statue of Liberty as it slipped past them. 172 third-class passengers aboard Carpathia had set out excitedly from their home just 1 week ago on Titanic to see this very sight. The welcome of a new life, the promise of a happier existence, but now more than 700 of their friends, family and shipmates went there to see it with them. Nobody knew quite what to expect once the ship had docked, but for now, with their loved ones at home, there was little more to do but wait and wonder what was coming for them once they arrived in America. One passenger on board reported overhearing a conversation between two immigrants. "I have nothing in the world and I have no place to go since my husband is lost," one woman said, "but I'm not afraid. I've always heard that the Americans were the kindest people in the world." Other survivors, in their own varied states of shock and grief, seemed to be processing their experiences in more unexpected ways. Bertha Mulvihill, an Irish third-class passenger, wrote a letter to her sister while aboard Carpathia, in what would appear to be a severe state of shock. "Dear Lord," she began, "the experience is great. I'm fine and dandy, never better. What time did you hear of the dreadful disaster? I am so glad I was in it. I shall never forget it. Don't think me mad for being so happy to witness the sight. I'm with a jolly crowd in this old ship. I'm awfully happy. Like the night I was born, never felt happier in my life. I have nothing to worry." Sounding more like a cheerful vacationer than the survivor of the world's greatest shipping disaster, Mulvihill's letter was just one example of how trauma, exhaustion, shock, and pure relief had begun to take some kind of toll on Titanic's few survivors. Small steamboats had taken to the water, chartered by journalists eager to be the first ones to catch the scoop firsthand from the survivors of the Titanic disaster. Once the ship was in sight, the blinding lights of flash bulbs lit up her hull. Just like that, the media circus was in full swing. Flares were used for extra lighting by photographers, turning night briefly into day. Journalists called out to passengers on board, desperate to interview anyone who might give them the time of day before the survivors had even disembarked. There were story-hungry among them even attempted to board the ship, either through bribery or brute force. Carpathia's Captain Rostrom picked up his megaphone and shouted that anybody who tried it would be shot down. One journalist actually succeeded in his plan, but was immediately apprehended and held by Captain Rostrom on the bridge until the ship docked. But despite all these security measures, there would apparently be no escaping predatory journalism. The passenger travelling on board Carpathia was a man by the name of Carlos Hurd. He was a reporter for the St. Louis Dispatch, and as a journalist, he was keen to recognize the opportunity wherever and whenever it appeared. Once word had spread that Carpathia was to be acting as a rescue ship for Titanic, Hurd realized he'd just been handed the story of a lifetime. It wouldn't come easy though. Captain Rostrom and the ship's crew were fully aware of Hurd's occupation, and were similarly aware of the need for privacy among the traumatized and exhausted survivors. The captain and crew all went to great lengths to ensure that Hurd and his wife Catherine would not be able to use the survivors' tragic situation for their own gain. Their stationery was removed from their cabin, and stewards were ordered to routinely check for any signs that the couple had been compiling notes. But despite all their safeguards, the two had still managed to conduct several interviews and begged fellow passengers for paper and writing utensils along the way. Catherine had kept the notes pinned to the inside of her corset and her petticoat to ensure the work would remain concealed. Meanwhile, in New York, Charles Chappin, editor for the newspaper The New York World, quickly made arrangements to charter a boat to await Carpathia's arrival, and as the ship made her way into the harbour, Heard took the reports and interviews collected by he and his wife, wrapped them up in a makeshift waterproof package, and hauled it overboard to Chapin. With this, the very first accounts of the Titanic rescue were as good as published. Despite scores of story-hungry journalists, photographers with their incessant flashing cameras and anxious onlookers all waiting to learn the full story, Carpathia still had one final somber task to attend to before her journey was properly over. The crowd of over 10,000 people looked on in confusion as Carpathia slowly passed right by her own berth at Cunard Pier 54, where she was meant to dock, and instead proceeded to White Star Line's Pier 59. It was here that the 13 of Titanic's lifeboats that had been recovered were unceremoniously offloaded, a grim and eerie reminder of the tragedy that had just taken place. It was a chilling sight. Titanic had sailed from Southampton just a week prior in all her splendour and glory, and now, instead of the beautiful liners sitting at the dock, there are only these tiny wooden boats and the survivors that had managed to escape in them. With this grim task now behind her, Carpathia made her way back to Pier 54, and finally, after enduring the most grueling ordeal of their lives, it was almost time for the Titanic survivors to once again set foot on dry land. By this time, the crowds of onlookers had swelled in size to 30,000 people. Some were friends, family and loved ones of those on board, but others merely wanted to bear witness to history unfolding despite the chill and the heavy rain. A strong police presence had been ordered for crowd control, and 35 ambulances were posted around the pier from each and every hospital in New York City. At 9:30 p.m, Carpathia had finally docked at the Cunard Pier, and the first order of business was for Carpathia's ticketed passengers to make their way off the ship. This was a protective measure put in place by Captain Rostrom, who predicted that the press would swarm at the sight of any shell-shocked survivors. For Carpathia's passengers, who had set out for the Mediterranean a week earlier, it was probably one of the most surreal experiences of their lives. First-class passengers, Dr. Henry Frauenthal and his wife Clara, were reportedly the first of Titanic survivors to disembark. As they stepped into the gangway, a hush fell over the crowd. They were quickly escorted through and into a waiting car, where they were whisked away from the prying eyes of the press. Following the Frauenthals, the other first-class passengers began to file off the ship, in varying stages of exhaustion and dishevelment, most in their pajamas or makeshift clothing. Many passengers needed to be carried down the gangway due to the extent of their injuries. They were loaded into ambulances and driven off to various hospitals throughout the city for treatment. Second and third class passengers followed, many of whom collapsed into the arms of waiting family members or policemen as the shock finally wore off. Lastly, the few surviving members of Titanic's crew trundled off. Of the 900 men and women who had signed on to work on board Titanic during the maiden voyage, only 214 had survived. Photographs showed grinning crew met with relief by loved ones, a small glimmer of happiness, and an otherwise confronting scene. The Central News reported, some of the scenes at the pier were indescribably affecting. Husbands meeting their rescued wives clung to them and kissed them tenderly. Many women were in a hysterical condition. There was a pathetic procession of sick and injured who were carried on stretchers to hospital. Passengers and crew were met by the city's relief and aid organisations who had sent their members to distribute food and clothing. The Women's Aid Committee, the Travelers Aid Society, the Council of Jewish Women, the Salvation Army, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, and the Red Cross all did their part, providing accommodation for the listless or medical attention for the sick and the injured. The Red Cross began to deal with a sudden influx of donations from across the United States and overseas. Tens of thousands of dollars which poured in and had to be distributed among Titanic's passengers and crew. One crewman in particular became the man of the hour as far as the press was concerned. Harold Bride had been a key witness to the disaster, assisting in the transmission of those crucial wireless distress calls. But he was not among the number of crew who disembarked Titanic that night. Remarkably, the 24-year-old had elected to stay on board Carpathia, which still continued to transmit messages in huge volumes. On the dock, reporters clamoured to get an interview with Titanic's flying wireless man, but it was the New York Times that would strike a deal with none other than the head of the Marconi International Mercantile Marine Communication Company, Quigley Elmer Marconi himself, to secure a Bride story. Marconi was naturally bribed through. He stepped aboard Carpathia that same night alongside New York Times reporter Jim Spears. As the two men entered the wireless room, Bride was so focused on his work that he didn't even look up from the machine. Seeing the opportunity to surprise the young man, taking a telegraph, Marconi took a moment to listen to the messages Bride had been sending out, and then, after a pause, he commented, "That's hardly worth sending out now, boy." The word snapped Bride out of his trance, and he turned to look around and was face to face with his childhood hero. Marconi extended a warm handshake, thanked Bride for his work, and then offered his condolences on the loss of his colleague, Titanic's chief radio operator Jack Phillips. He then introduced Bride to Spears, the reporter accompanying him, and informed Bride that if he wanted to tell his story, the Times was prepared to pay him the equivalent of $16,000 in today's money. Bride would be a fool to say no to the offer and refuse his hero, so he eagerly agreed. The next day, his story was published in a 5-column front-page piece in the New York Times. His work finally done, Bride was carried bodily off the ship, his feet bandaged tightly. Meanwhile, J. Bruce Ismay had no idea of what kind of nightmare he was just about to endure. As news had slowly filtered through of Titanic's loss, Franklin, the New York-based vice president of the White Star Line, had sent a few messages through to Ismay after he had been revived from his catatonic state. Franklin knew that he and Ismay were in deep trouble because the story was about to get out of control. As Carpathia approached New York, Franklin messaged, "Concise Marconi band of actual accident needed for enlightenment public and ourselves. This is most important." But Ismay's response was buried by a message blackout instituted by Carpathia's Captain Rostrom, which ensured that only Marconi bands telling family members their loved ones were safe were being transmitted with any urgency. Franklin's attempts to get ahead of the story had failed, and what messages from Ismay had been transmitted detailed his request for the White Star Line of Cedric to be made ready to repatriate Ismay and Titanic's crew as soon as possible. These messages were picked up by the US Navy, and they were handed on to a senator, William Alden Smith, who had other plans for the White Star Line channel. He waited with a small party of detectives at the New York pier as Carpathia docked. Ismay had issued instructions upon arrival in New York that no international mercantile marine ships were to sail without a sufficient number of lifeboats for every person on board. The rest of the industry quickly followed suit, but as Ismay made preparations to disembark Carpathia, there was a polite knock on the stateroom door, and in stepped Philip Franklin with fresh clothes and some bad news. In barged Senators William Alden Smith and Francis Williams. Ismay was told he would not be departing home aboard Cedric. Instead, he would need to appear at a hastily convened Senate inquiry beginning the very next morning. Escorted by detectives, Ismay at last left Carpathia, and with Franklin gave his first statement, which began, "In the presence and under the shadow of a catastrophe so overwhelming, my feelings are too deep for expression in words." Ismay was subjected to intense scrutiny by both the media and the American inquiry, and it was not going in his favour. His old nemesis, William Randall Forrest, ran the nation's largest newspaper chain. He leapt at the opportunity to orchestrate Ismay's downfall. American papers ran sensational headlines, and White Star's chairman was nicknamed J. Bruce Ismay for daring to save himself. The damage was done, and his reputation could never recover. As Ismay, Bride, and the other Titanic crew members sat in the lobby of the Sawyer, answering Senator Smith's questions back out in the open ocean, their work was being done. The cable-laying ship Mackay Bennett was one of 4 vessels tasked with recovering Titanic today. The vessels set out from Halifax and began to search for any signs of the victims, and precious few were found, a little over 330 of the 1,496 people lost. Their personal items were catalogued in detail, but many were buried at sea. The rich and the poor were brought on board and examined. These were Titanic's silent witnesses, those who could never give their testimony. Hundreds still were never found. Captain Smith, Thomas Andrews, and many, many more. In Belfast, the town that had created Titanic, the outpouring of sorrow from the men who had actually driven home with iron rivets by hand was deeply moving. At Southampton, where 3/4 of Titanic's crew had called home, there was an intense grief that gripped the population. And at Liverpool, lists of the rescued had to be read from the balconies of the White Star Line office because the crowds were so furious. Still, thanks to Carpathia's efforts, more than 700 people arrived in New York alive to meet their loved ones in America or to return home to American bottom. The rostrum and the crew of Carpathia had been a whirlwind week. Their seamanship had been pushed to the absolute limit the night they rushed to Titanic's rescue. They'd almost hit an iceberg themselves. In a story with many perceived villains, Rostrum emerged as one of the heroes. Filmed on the decks of his ship, he gave curt interviews and gave little away. And then he was surprised by Margaret Brown. The Survivor Committee's funds had commissioned bronze medallions for his crew commemorating their efforts, and for a spectacular silver cup for their captain. She presented it to Rostrum in front of news cameramen. Rostrum was also showered with medals from the US government for his valour. When the captain later cast his mind back to the night of April 14th, and the following morning, he simply said, "When day broke, I saw the ice I had steamed through during the night. I shuddered and could only think that some other hand than mine was on that helm during the night." 17-year-old Jack Thayer had tried to comfort his way to no avail after Titanic sank, even though he had lost his own father in the sinking. Overwhelmed by the media response, the frantic news cameramen and the volumes of newspaper reports and media sensationalism, Thayer reflected nearly 30 years later on the world the Titanic disaster left in its wake. There was peace and the world had an even tenor to its way, he said. Nothing was revealed in the morning, the trend of which was not known the night before. It seems to me that the disaster about to occur was the event that not only made the world rub its eyes and awake, but woke it with a start, keeping it moving at a rapidly accelerating pace ever since, with less and less peace, satisfaction and happiness. To my mind, the world of today awoke on April 15th, 1912. Titanic does not have room to live. For the past 2 hours, the ship has fought a losing battle against buoyancy and gravity, and now she's beginning to give up her last ounce of strength in the fight to stay afloat. Compartments are flooded, hallways and the remote public room are slowly going under. It's a matter of time, and the clock has already started. The ship doesn't have much time left. What's about to play out is some of the most awful, harrowing drama to ever happen at sea. This 45,000-ton ocean liner is about to be violently swallowed by the ocean, and the hundreds of people clinging desperately to it for survival are about to endure a series of horrible events. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a friend who ran for ocean liner designs, and today I've partnered with our good friends at Titanic Island Line to use their incredible animations to bring to you some of the true, horrifying stories from Titanic's final 5 minutes. In the immediate aftermath of Titanic's collision with the iceberg, it became clear that something was horribly wrong. The realization wasn't quick. For the ship's crew and designers, it took some time to gauge what was actually happening, and slowly the clues began to come in. At the forepeak, the very front of the ship, a hissing noise was heard that indicated that air was being pushed out of a vent from somewhere deep within the ship, and only water could be the thing pushing the air out. Elsewhere, covers of the cargo hatches began to bulge outwards because of that same effect. After some 45 minutes, the situation had become clear. Titanic was sinking. She was going down slowly, but she would definitely sink. For 2 hours or so, the ship had settled slowly in the water. It was so gradual that it tricked people into a false sense of security. Everybody thought the ship couldn't sink. That myth had spread through word of mouth and was even being pushed by the ship's officers and doctors on board. But it was only after some of the early lifeboats were lowered and sent away with reluctant, Many of the cynical occupants that they noticed the ship was sitting lower by the head in the water, and it only got worse. For the next hour or so, the ship's boats were filled and lowered, and things had started off calmly. But by the end, when the feeling of the ship sinking underfoot could no longer be ignored, the Nirvana began to play out, and panic settled in. By 2:10 in the morning, the ship's bow was underwater, and the last of the boats were being got ready, and the end seemed near. But then, things took an unexpected turn for the worst. The Titanic took a plunge downward. We'll pick the story up at 2:10 a.m. Titanic's bridge front is dangerously close to the lapping waves. In the Marconi wireless room on the boat deck, Harold Blyde and Jack Phillips, the two young wireless operators, are desperately firing off distress calls in an attempt to organise a rescue. They know that Carpathia, the nearest ship, is still hours away, and although they can't see outside from their office, they can tell the end must be near, because they can hear people rushing about outside on deck, and, perhaps more ominously, the ship's power is beginning to dwindle, and with it, so too is their wireless system's range. While Phillips taps out his urgent calls for help, Blyde fiddles with the machinery to try to get the maximum power possible. Outside, on deck, things are getting desperate. The Titanic had a pronounced shear where either end of the ship was designed to rise slightly upward to aid against pitching up and down in the ocean. But this shear had masked the forward angle downward that Titanic had assumed all night. By now, that angle had reached about 8 or 9 degrees, and it was greater than the shear, and passengers could at last tell that their ship was going down by the head. The ones that began to crowd the deck outside could see something else that was ominous. The lifeboats were all gone. Minutes prior, groups of panicked people had tried to force their way aboard the last to be lowered, but pistols had been fired by the crew to scare them away. And now, with the deadwood lifeboats all gone and rowing away from the ship, the crew were battling to release and fill the last remaining collapsible boats. These were an absolute last resort, a kind of flat-bottomed barge with canvas sides which could be raised to keep the water out. They were smaller than the main lifeboats, with an occupancy count of just 47, with around 1,500 people still left on board, and there were now just spots left for 94 of them. But there was a problem. The boats are kept high up on the roof of the officers' quarters above the boat deck, where the davits, which are the lifeboat cranes, were located to actually launch the boats over the ship's side. First Officer William Murdoch has been in charge of lowering and filling lifeboats on Titanic's starboard and right-hand side, while Second Officer Charles Lightoller has commanded the port side operations. And now, both lead teams of men to manhandle those collapsible boats from off of the roof down onto the boat deck where they can be filled and lowered away. There was a whole system for this. The collapsibles were meant to be attached with guy wires to the first funnels, support cables and stays, and the tackle could be used to then gradually lower the heavy boats down with simple pulleys. But there was a simple unforeseen problem with this neat arrangement. The tackle was stored forward in the bow section, which by now was already over 100 feet below the ocean's surface. The men struggled with the boats and maneuvered them by hand while crowds of people jostled and watched on helplessly. At the stern, dozens of people have gathered, instinctually attempting to get as far away from the water as possible, but it's a hopeless affair because sooner or later the stern will be consumed as well. They are gathered in groups, with one passenger describing them as looking like clumps of bees. Many of them are third-class passengers. They had gathered earlier in the aft well deck near the general and smoking rooms to await instruction that simply never came. Now, with no boats left and the ship's bow slipping below, they gather at the stern and wait for the end. In the third-class general room, a woman nervously plays piano for her young daughter on her lap. Above her head, on the poop deck, two priests, Father Thomas Biles and Father Joseph Karushitz, are giving absolution, hearing confession and reciting the rosary to over 100 passengers who crowd around them. The stern is beginning to lift higher out of the air, and the three bronze screw propellers have emerged ominously from the ocean. Fighting his way through the crowd is 23-year-old storekeeper Frank Prentice. He stood on the poop deck chatting idly with his friends Cyril Ricks and Michael Kieran, but now it's becoming too crowded. The trio begin to consider climbing over the port side railing and jumping. Down in the bowels of the ship, icy water roars through openings, not from below, but from above. Titanic has sunk slowly so far, with water coming in only through the iceberg-damaged hull, but now, with her bow underwater, tons and tons of ocean water can surge through the vents, cargo hatches and open spaces up on deck. It means that the more Titanic goes under, the faster she sinks, and those not already up on deck are caught by the rapidly rising water level and drowned. At the base of the forward funnel, the crew, under Officers Murdoch and Lightoller, are still struggling with the collapsible boats when a huge crowd of third-class passengers surge out of a door from the first-class grand staircase at its entrance. It's not known where these dozens of people had come from or when it got held up down below, but for the crew planning to lower the last lifeboats, it was a sudden shock. They thought most of the women and children had got away safely, but now dozens more had appeared from nowhere, panicked and desperately seeking escape. In the wireless office, Titanic's radio men are still hard at work, and the stoker creeps in to try to steal Philip's lifebelt from him while he works at the wireless key. Harold Bride strikes him down and knocks him out cold, so Phillips, who so far had been completely absorbed in his work, is at last persuaded to escape from the office. Bride later recalls of Phillips that he was a brave man. I learned to love him that night, and I suddenly felt a great reverence to see him standing there sticking to his work while everybody was raging about. The two men burst through the door on the port side of the boat deck and take it all in. Bride remembered that there were people running all over the place and that from somewhere aft, the ship's orchestra was still playing jaunty ragtime music. Bride hears a call for help from above his head. It's Second Officer Lightoller, who needs more men to bodily move collapsible B down from the roof. He turns to help, but Phillips has left his side and run aft towards Titanic's stern. Bride will never see his friend again. Just behind Bride, around the second funnel, Titanic's band is preparing to play their last song. Band leader Wallace Hartley, 33, had once told a friend of his, who was another ship's musician, that he would play a hymn were he ever to be on a sinking ship. Having played cheery music all night, now the band begins to play a final, slow song as the chaos unfolds around them. The actual song chosen has been debated about for years. Harold Bride, about 100 feet away and busy helping free the collapsible boats, swears later in life that he heard the Song d'Automne, while others heard the hymn Nearer My God to Thee. Either way, the touching music is another ominous sign of impending doom because now water has begun to roar up the A-deck promenade stairs leading up to the boat deck. First Officer William Murdoch and his men on the starboard side cranked in the number 1 davit and prepared it to attach the falls to collapsible A. Now the time has come to get the boats down. Oars are rigged as spars to try to slide the boats down from the rooftop. On the starboard side, collapsible A thumps down with a hand and lands right side up on the deck. But on the other side, collapsible B collapses the spars under its massive weight and thunders onto the deck upside down. But now there's another problem. Titanic has taken on an enormous list to port, so now the area of the bridge and the boat deck around collapsible B is already beginning to dip underwater. White foam begins to swirl around the recently freed boat, and there's no time to flip it over and attach it for lowering because the ocean has already risen to meet it. The crowd of refugees from below turns to flee in terror and panic, heading for the fake safety of the stern, which is lifting higher into the air with every second. Collapsible B simply floats off the deck upside down as the ship begins to disappear beneath it. And trapped underneath the boat somehow is wireless operator Harold Bride. He helped get the thing off the roof, and now he's caught underneath it, inside an airport. On the starboard side, the men under Officer Murdoch are working desperately to sort out their own collapsible boat. Nobody is exactly sure of the plan. Murdoch had ordered the davits cranked in, and now men are working at untangling the falls and tackle and trying to connect them to the boat. Sixth Officer James Moody has other ideas. He calls out, "We don't want the block, and we'll leave the boat on the deck." His idea is to simply let it float off, but others are still trying to connect the falls. They try pushing and pulling the boat up the deck towards the davits, but it's no use. The boat just weighs too much. Then, with a roar, the ocean bursts up and out of the stairs leading up to the boat deck, and the ocean has at last reached them. Some jump into the boat, but then somebody shouted out that the plug hadn't yet been put in. At sea, the plug was left out so that any rainwater could simply drain out, but now, without it, the lifeboat will be swamped. Fireman John Thompson, with injuries from a steam scalding earlier in the night, struggles desperately to get the plug back in. He feels the boat begin to be lifted by the surging, foamy water from underneath him. The dozens of passengers who come up from below have panicked and tried to flee aft, but they've encountered an unexpected barrier. The Titanic boat deck is a huge, open space, but it was segregated. The forward half is for the use of first-class passengers, while the after half was shared by second-class passengers and the ship's engineers. All of these sections were separated by low railings with gates, and now the crowd of terrified passengers, some 100 or 200 in total, run up against the railings and get stuck. A crush develops, and there is no getting through. The time is now 2:15 a.m., and across the ship mouths call out for help that couldn't come. The Carpathia is still miles away, making full steam, but with no hope of arriving in time. The Titanic's stern is now high out in the air. She's down by the head by about 10 or 11 degrees, but she seems to hang there. It's all happening in slow motion. Around the collapsible A boat, people cling on for dear life as white water sweeps around their feet. The crowds along the promenade deck struggle desperately to try to get through towards the stern. Meanwhile, at the very stern of the ship, people hold railings and each other for support. The two priests are still saying their absolutions. Then, abruptly, the end comes for Titanic. From somewhere deep below, the final pockets of air which have given the ship her buoyancy finally give out. The bow section drops like a stone. What has so far been a slowly rising tide of water becomes a tidal wave. It speeds up the boat deck, washing collapsible boat A up and off the deck for good, with whoever could cling onto it in tow. The wave smashes into the people who have got caught in the railings on the promenade deck, and it knocks anybody who was unprepared for it off their feet. One man who was prepared was Second Officer Charles Lytle. After getting collapsible B off the roof, he'd been helping with the other boat when the ship simply sank out from underneath him. He thought briefly about turning to run for the stern, but realised that this was futile. Instead, he dives from the bridge front into the ocean and strikes out for the crow's nest, which by now is level with the waterline. But he realises that this too is futile because soon it will be underwater. He turns to swim back when he's suddenly pulled underwater and has the great misfortune of becoming pinned to the giant open mouth of one of the massive stokehold intake vents. These things lead all the way down to the boiler rooms, which are themselves a giant open space, and now tons and tons of seawater are pouring in and keeping Lytle stuck up against the grating. He begins to say his prayers, knowing that he's finished, but then a burst of hot air from below spits him off the grating and sends him to the surface. Gasping, he emerges and begins to swim away from the suction. At the very stern, Frank Prentice and his mates have climbed over the portside railing as the crowds on deck jostle. The ship's angle is increasing all the time. Titanic is now about 13 or 14 degrees down by the head. It means that the poop deck, which once stood 4 or 5 stories out of the water, is now up at least 10 stories high. As Titanic rears higher and higher out of the water, everything movable inside her begins to crash down. Furniture, plates, decor. It creates a symphony of destruction as everything shatters and breaks. The promenade deck's ornate windows have met the water now. They too begin to shatter inwards because of the pressure difference. Frank Prentice and his friends realise that the time has come. If they hold off from jumping any longer, then the fall will kill them. Frank is holding onto one of the notice boards which once warned other smaller vessels to stay away from the Titanic's propellers. He lets go and falls straight past those same propellers which now sit high in the air. He is extremely lucky, because even though he's wearing a life jacket, he hits the water and survives. Many who tried this were killed instantly when their life jackets smashed back into their heads on impact, breaking their necks. Frank's friend Cyril Ricks hit debris on the way down and was killed. Prentice now finds himself surrounded by bodies and debris, with the massive ship's stern moving dangerously over him. He begins to swim away. On the boat deck, people are struggling to still rush afterwards for safety, while around the base of the forward funnel they swarm, caught off guard by the sudden plunge. They are swimming for nowhere in particular. Charles Lightoller was among them. He'd survived being pinned to the vent intake and then emerged at the surface. Now he swims back for collapsible B and holds on. But then there is a loud crack like a gunshot. And then another one. The steel cable stays that connected Titanic's forward funnel to the boat deck are beginning to part ways. The funnel begins to lumber through the air like a drum. It's coming down. It had actually been quite well supported against the forward angle because, by nature, it was angled itself backwards by about 3 or 4 degrees to help clear soot up and over the decks. Now, tons of water were pressing at its base. It's made of only thin steel plating, and it was never designed to survive this kind of pressure. The thing is 4 or 5 stories tall, and by itself weighs tons. It comes down with a roar onto the heads of dozens of people who are swimming in water. One of them is Charles Dwayne Williams. His son Richard is just feet away when the funnel comes crashing down and crushes him. Richard was transfixed by the sight, recalling later that it wasn't because of the fact that he'd killed his father and missed him by mere feet, but because he was wondering at the enormous size of the funnel which still belched smoke. The forward funnel smashed into the ocean and created a huge wave which washed over Collapsible B and sent it away from the ship. Collapsible A was caught up in the wave too. It was sent spinning away like a toy, smashing into one of the lifeboat davits, causing one fireman to break his arm. The funnel broke loose and rolled off into the water, sinking, creating a new horror. Where it had once stood was now an open moor 25 feet across, a blank shaft that led deep into the bowels of the ship. Water now roared in and carried anybody close enough nearby with it into a swirling, hellish whirlpool. Then it's funnel number 2's turn. With a whoosh and a brilliant explosion of sparks from below, it smashes down into the water. The time is 2:17 a.m. The Titanic is dying. To the growing din of smashing glassware and windows comes a new noise, a dull roar. To some, it sounds like a passing locomotive in a subway. Some would mistake it to be the ship's machinery and boilers becoming unseated and crashing forward through the bulkheads, but that's not it. The noise begins to reach a crescendo. It's actually the Titanic's steel structure beginning to fail. Individual beams and columns are bent and begin to crack. Hull plating is tearing, rivets are popping, wood paneling is shattering. Under the strain, steam lines and pipes crack and burst. The lights, which have stayed on so far all night, are powered by steam dynamos. Without their supply of steam, they begin to wind down, and the lights snap off. Then, it happens. Titanic's weakened structure fails. The entire hull comes apart down to the waterline, with a sound like rolling thunder. Her back is broken. The stern comes down into water again, although more gently than you might expect. Some don't even ever see the ship break in two, although many do. Their testimony at future inquiries will eventually be ignored. The pride of British shipbuilding could not simply break in two, but it just did. Only hours earlier, the ship's chief designer, Thomas Andrews, had told passengers that Titanic could be broken into sections and then those individual sections could remain afloat. But now his theory is about to be put to the test in the most horrifying way possible. His ship is rent apart. Funnel number 3 is caught off balance and tumbles off the ship, but funnel number 4 gets caught on the boat deck and stays in place after it collapses. Titanic's stern comes down almost level with the water again, and many think that it's returned to normal trim and will stay afloat. It stays there for a few long seconds, but then begins to rear up again. The break isn't a clean one. Sections of the lower hull remain intact. Plating, steel stringers and frames, the keel and the double bottom. Titanic's skeleton is strong, and it hasn't yet completely failed, but where the stern isn't flooded yet and full of air, the bow is now hundreds of thousands of tons of waterlogged dead weight. It is dropping for the sea floor like a stone and pulling the stern down with it. Holding on for dear life as the gargantuan stern section begins to whirl through the air as Chief Baker Charles